Tom Brady was not a very good NFL quarterback, except if you count those 7 Super Bowl rings. Michael Jordan wasn't very good at basketball, except for that time in the 1990s when he won 3 NBA championships in a row twice. And in an Olympic year, it's important to remember that being less than 5 feet tall, Simone Biles is not an exceptional athlete, except for being the most decorated gymnast ever. I think of these things when I read in the scriptures. And Jesus could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. Even in seemingly unfavorable times and places, God shows up. We who would follow Jesus should follow Jesus into these unexpected places, enjoying God and working wonders. We are tempted to think that somehow the lack of faith in Jesus' hometown somehow limits Jesus' power. The point of at least this first portion of today's gospel is that Jesus is rejected by his own people. And in that rejection, that faithlessness, that disbelief, that inability to receive Jesus, they will not receive his words. But there's a bit of a trap here that we need to avoid. The Gospel of Mark says that Jesus could do no deeds of power, and then he lists the deeds of power that Jesus did. It says Jesus was amazed at their unbelief, and their disbelief seems to inhibit him somehow. Last week we read, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." And last week we heard, "Do not fear, only believe." It appears that in Mark, faith makes you well. Literally saves you. Mark 9:23 tells us, all things can be done for one who believes. But it is not, strictly speaking, belief in God that saves. It is God who saves. And there's a difference there. To be remembered, lest we fall into the same trap of those who rejected Jesus. Do miracles only come for those that work hard for them? Does salvation only belong to those who believe particular things and worship in particular ways? Does God only love those who work and believe and act and talk just as we do? Or does God's love extend farther than we would have it? Does God's love not extend even into places of rejection and disbelief? Even in Jesus' hometown, which has become a space of rejection and disbelief, the grace of God cannot be bound. And despite the lack of faith, healing comes nonetheless, even among those who reject Jesus. And so in those spaces of our minds where we're still skeptical, God shows up. Even in the places of our heart that reject Jesus or wonder, God shows up. Even in places where we don't expect God to be, God shows up. Jesus goes into unexpected places, into the places that reject him, to places that seemingly don't deserve him. In this passage, Jesus goes from the synagogue to the villages. And from there, from the outskirts of society, Jesus sends his disciples from and to the unexpected. We must do the same, following Jesus from the unexpected to the unexpected. When I was training as a hospital chaplain, I much preferred the trauma ICU to other areas of the hospital because the doors are all open there. Patients have to be monitored, so they keep the doors open. There wasn't that awkward knocking that in the oncology units, where you had to have some awkward conversation to see if they even wanted you there. There seemed to be less of a chance in the ICU of telling a patient undergoing chemo and suffering its side effects that you'll get out of their hair, which I totally once did. Instead, the doors were open, and the patients were usually happy to see you, or being in traction when we weren't going anywhere. I met a man who'd been in an accident at work, his right leg severely broken. But his biggest worry wasn't about his health. It was that he wouldn't be able to send money to his large extended family that he was supporting. It was his responsibility, a responsibility he'd seemed to come to resent. Why is it all on me? He asked. Why can't they just do for themselves the same way I've done? Because now I can't help. I said, maybe this time might be different. No. He told me this wasn't the first time this had happened. And his family continued to depend on him. This was the third time his right leg had been injured. He had quite a dangerous job, it seemed, for this to happen 3 times to the same leg. I made an awkward joke. It sounds like your left leg needs to get injured once in a while and pull its own weight. I got a better response from him. But that's how awkward jokes go. He laughed and said, I get it. My left leg is my family. Don't make me laugh. It hurts. God showed up in healing laughter. In a trainee that still has no idea what he's doing. In a man injured and plagued by doubt and worry for the future. In a trauma ICU where it wasn't expected. We are not all extraordinary athletes, but we can be extraordinary followers of Jesus. Following Jesus makes us extraordinary. They went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them. Mark is trying to tell us this morning that Jesus was rejected by those closest to him. But he is forced to acknowledge that healing comes even among those who disbelieve. Follow Jesus then into unexpected places. Have the courage to knock on the door and have an awkward conversation or make a joke that falls flat. Even in seemingly unfavorable times and places, God shows up. So look for the positive changes happening around you and join God in working wonders. It's true that God shows up for those who believe. But it's also true that God shows up, whether you believe or not.